Mia, can you go ahead and start the recording? Let us know when it's all set.
All set.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this information session on the path to becoming an AEM Cohort state. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. So glad that you're able to join us this afternoon for this information session, more than a webinar, where we're just here to answer lots of questions that you may have about the application, and hopefully you will leave here. We'll encourage you to apply as well. So if you could go to the next slide, Cynthia. Just to let you know, we have captioning available for today's webinar / information session. So thank you to Kara from ACS Captions for providing those captions. On Zoom, there is a closed caption button. It should be at the bottom of the screen. It depends on your layout. But you can select that option and it will show the captions for you. So thanks once again, Kara, for providing our captioning support this afternoon. And we encourage you, most of you have found the chat already and let us know where you're joining from. So we love that because it creates a more personal atmosphere here. But use the chat to share any questions that you have throughout the webinar. Do make sure that you choose all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you may be sending your message to an individual person and the rest of us may not see it. And maybe that the comment that you have or the question that you have is one that everybody would benefit from. So make sure that you choose all panelists and attendees. The next slide, Cynthia. And there will be a recording of this session. That was really our intention with doing it, is to make sure we have a recording that we could point people to as they prepare to submit their application, as they do their planning to do that. So within the next week, we will have a recording on the AEM Center website. And there's a short URL for that that will drop into the chat, but it's bit.ly, bit.ly, and then /AEM, AEM states, and the S in states is capitalized, #1. So we'll drop that into the chat. That will take you to the event page for this information session, and that's where you'll find the recording, like I said, in about a week, once we have the closed captions added to it. And next slide. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia, who's the director of the AEM Center, and she will get us started with the rest of the webinar.
Great, thanks a lot, Luis, and thank you everybody for being here. We're glad that there's an interest in being an AEM state. Luis and I will share with you what the benefits and responsibilities are, and we would also love to hear from those of you. There's several people here who have been involved in the AEM Center in the past, so if you want to share a little bit about the AEM Center's technical assistance as we go along, so that people have an idea of some of the examples of how we work with the field, that would be really helpful. Luis and I will be giving some examples, but if anybody who's received TA from the AEM Center in the past, we'd love to hear from you. I also wanted to thank Mia Gross, who is another CAST AEM Center specialist who, well, she's not a specialist, she's better than a specialist in a lot of ways. She's a project manager, so she makes sure that we are able to specialize in what we do. So she's in the background supporting us. So you'll see Mia under the AEM Center in the chat. So thank you, Mia, for being here as well as Kara. So the objective today is to make sure that all of you have the information that you need to successfully complete the AEM State application. That's the whole purpose that we're here. We're going to give you a tour of our website where you will find the information that you need, the benefits, the responsibilities, and the criteria by which we'll be selecting the next cohort of AEM states. And we'll also be walking you through the application itself, really encouraging you to ask as many questions as you want, both during the presentation as well as after. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and we also have a survey at the end of the webinar as well. So if you realize that there was something you forgot to ask, you can always go to that survey, and you can also always email us. So we have, before we go to the questions, we have a number of questions by poll. So Mia, if you would launch the first poll question, we'd be really happy to know how many people here have reviewed the AEM State application materials on the AEM Center's website. Okay, so about half of you, a little bit more than half of you. Okay, great. That's good to know. If you haven't been there, you're going to have a chance. Okay, good. So we have, all right, so this is good to know. We have some people who haven't had a chance to look at those materials. The next Next poll, please. Okay, this question is, I have connected with others in my state to consider the opportunity to be an AIM state. So if you have reached out to somebody at your State Department of Education or somebody in your AT Act project, or maybe somebody in Instructional Materials Center, somebody in a school district, if you've done that, let us know. So results are still coming in. So it looks like about 8 of you have not, about 5 of you had. Okay, good. This is really good information. Applying to be an AIM state cohort really is a collaborative process. So even though there may just be obviously one person who clicks submit on the application, you'll really want to make sure that you're collaborating with everybody in your state, other people in your state who are interested in being part of the project. Okay, next poll. There's one more question. My state plans to apply. So if you know at this point, so that's a yes, it could be quite possibly, or you're just here to learn more. All right, so 2 of you, all right, so 2 states, two of you are from states that plan to apply, 5 quite possibly, and 6 are here to learn more. Okay, thank you, all of that's really helpful. All right, so I'm gonna jump over to share my web browser. And we're going to go to the page on the AIM Center website where you'll find the information about being an AIM, about applying for the AIM state opportunity. So when you go to the AIM Center website, if you go to aim.cas.org, and I know that the either Luis or Mia probably putting the direct link into the chat, but just in case you come back to the website later and need to find your way to the application information, you come to our homepage, aim.cas.org, and then in the About AIM tab, scroll on down to AIM State Cohort Application, and you'll be taken to the information that you need. So we're seeking 5 states to collaborate with us on this AIM State Cohort opportunity. We want to make sure that every state has what they need in order to build capacity to make sure that learners with disabilities in your state have access to accessible materials and technologies at the same time as their peers. And in this current AIM Center, we are working toward providing technical assistance to multiple stakeholder groups. So early childhood, K12, higher ed, workforce, and families. So that's what we're looking for in a cohort, is to have that cross-functional interagency collaboration across the state, which is why it's so important for you to be reaching out to others in your state to find out where else is their interest, where can you build off of motivation that's already happening in your state. So some of the logistics, of course, the due date is May 1st. So it's helpful for you to get that, be oriented to about how much time you'd have to complete the application. If you have additional questions after today, of course, we offer other ways that you can get those answered through the survey at the end of today's webinar, sending us an email. You can also come back and come to the March 9th webinar. So we're doing this informational session again on that date. This page shares with you everything you need to know, to get started. You probably have additional questions. But partnering with us means that you're working with us to implement what we would call high leverage and in some case evidence-based practices that lead toward comprehensive, robust systems in your state for providing AIM and accessible technologies. You may be familiar with our quality indicators with critical components for providing AIM at the state level as well as at the local level. We also have critical components for higher education and critical components for workforce. As part of this new center, we're also developing critical components for providing AIM to early childhood programs or children in early childhood programs. So working with the AIM Center in this next cohort really means helping us with both developing those critical components for quality provision of AIM and accessible technologies, helping us develop the right products and services to support states, trying these practices out yourself with intensive technical assistance for the K-12 level, as well as targeted technical assistance for those other agencies within your state. So your early childhood programs, higher education institutions, workforce programs, and your family centers. So the idea here is that your state will get coaching and individualized support in the process of improving what you currently have in place for accessible material and technology provision for individuals across your system. So that transition from early childhood through K-12, entering higher ed, onto workforce, supporting, making sure that families are engaged across those transitions, consistent communication, allocation of resources. All of these coordinated pieces are what we're working toward when we're partnering with states in this cohort. So in addition to you and your state receiving this coaching and individualized assistance, you also have the benefit of working with 4 other states. So we're looking for a 5-state cohort. And in addition to exchanging resources, sharing experiences, the idea is that you would also meet on a regular basis with other states working in the same direction, as well as opportunities to collaborate on the development of resources that can also be scaled up nationally. So some of the benefits for you specifically, other than this free, targeted, and intensive technical assistance at no cost to you, is that you'll also receive a $2,000 stipend, and it's not much, but it's annual, and you can use that money towards supporting the work of your team. So this could be travel expenses, reimbursing for individuals who may be having to travel to one place in order to meet and to form plans, to develop a strategy. Could be for subscriptions, it could be for supplies. It's anything that your state really needs in order to support this process. And you also will get an ATIA Learning Center subscription. So ATIA, the Assistive Technology Industry Association, has an online learning program. And as part of our partnership with ATIA in this project, each state will get 40 seats, licensed for 40 seats to that subscription. And some other benefits, obviously, collaborating with other states in this process, and also to be recognized as a national change agent. So we find that this is really, it can be a motivator for some states because it gives you an opportunity to co-present, share the resources that you're developing, be looked up to be a critical friend to other states as you're scaling up this work. So it brings a lot of visibility to the good work that your state is doing, which is always a good thing. Some of the responsibilities of being an AIM state, you'll need to put together a K12 leadership team at the state level. So your K12 leadership team is actually the team that oversees sort of the whole AIM, the AIM state activities. You would have, for example, it could be leadership that starts at the State Department of Education, could be leadership that begins with the with your AT Act leaders. It could be from the instructional materials or regional services agencies, but there needs to be a leadership team that is specific, relevant to the K12 system in your state. The reason for that is because the way the AIM Center is structured, according to our award from the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Ed, is that K12 recipients will receive intensive TA. So school districts that are part of your state level leadership team, as well as the state level leadership team that supports K12 education in your state, will receive intensive TA. So that's more of an ongoing, individualized coaching and support from AIM Center technical assistant specialists. While the other agencies, your early childhood, higher ed, workforce programs, and family centers will receive targeted TA. So it's technical assistance, but it won't be as intensive as what the K12 agency and related services will be receiving. And that's just simply because of the structure of the center and the way that the U.S. Department of Education has set it up. So we want to make sure that in the application process, that you've identified a number of people in your state who are at that state level, and the more cross-functional at the state K12 level, the better. So your ed tech director, special education director, representation from the AT Act project, families. So you could have, kind of a wide range, cross-functional, to make sure that all of these areas of importance for making sure that students with disabilities, job seekers with disabilities, toddlers with disabilities receive their materials and technologies in accessible formats, making sure that the features are in place for them. This cross-cuts all of those different stakeholder groups. You'll want to, once you have your team in place, so this includes your state level leadership, your early childhood representatives, so we're talking IDEA Part C there, representation from higher education, so that could be state university, community college system, workforce development program representation, so this is voc rehab, career and technical education folks, and representation from parent centers. So this could be your parent and training information centers, could be your community and parent resource centers, or within your state, whatever your context is, where these representatives might come from. Once you have your team in place, you'll need to coordinate them, coordinate your team to meet face-to-face. And we're hoping that this is what we would call the kickoff. So your state leadership team with your Interagency Collaborative. We're hoping that kickoff could happen in the fall. So October, November, December. We're hoping to be able to identify and notify states that will be part of the cohort in early June. So that will give your state level team several months to identify individuals in each of these targeted TA groups and to convene together. Somebody from the AEM Center or a couple of people from the AEM Center will join you, will help coordinate that meeting and also be present to provide support in terms of getting your team started. You'll receive ongoing technical assistance from the AEM Center. So this will be technical assistance for your leadership team. So again, this is the intensive TA that we'll be providing to your state level K12. The state level team will need to identify at least 3 school districts to partner with you. And we are really looking for, expecting at least one of those school districts to be representative of underrepresentation. So this could be rural schools, could be schools that have a high percentage of students from low socioeconomic status or English language learners, cultural diversity. And then there'll be targeted technical assistance for that interagency collaborative. So we have specialists at CAST who have subject matter expertise in early childhood learning, in higher ed, in workforce, and with families. So this interagency collaborative, although won't be receiving the intensive technical assistance that the K12 leadership team will receive, as you go into the details of how the TA will be delivered, you'll see that the meetings will be less frequent for that interagency collaborative, but there'll be training on the implementation of the critical components for the quality indicators of AIM for each of those groups. Of course, throughout the 4 years of the project, maintaining communication and coordination with the AIM Interagency Collaborative. So the first indication of that will be the kickoff meeting this fall. We are expecting bi-monthly or quarterly meetings with your targeted TA or Interagency Collaborative. And then at the end of the project to reconvene together. And again, an AIM Center representation will be there. Of course, participate in the AIM cohort. So that will be bi-monthly meetings where your leadership team will meet with the leadership teams of the other 4 states in order to problem solve, share resources, essentially learn from each other in the process of improving your AIM provision systems. Supporting the development and dissemination of AIM Center products and services. So we want to make sure that we're co-developing our technical assistance with the AIM cohort. So as we're working with the cohort, we'll obviously learn a lot about what's working and what's not working in improving the provision of AIM for individuals with disabilities across the state system. So we'll be asking you to help us with the development of some of these resources, ask you to serve as quality assurance reviewers of the TA that we're developing, and also ask you to support us maybe in some of the delivery of that as well. So co-presenting at conferences, on webinars, really, like I said, being visible as the practitioners in building these better systems. And then, of course, contributing to the evaluation of our center, because our cohort will really have the best knowledge, really on-the-ground experience with how we're doing and how we can continuously improve. We have an external evaluator of the AIM Center who will be doing interviews as well as some surveys. So it won't be a lot of time to help us with that evaluation, but occasional surveys, occasional interviews will be part of the project. So if we've caught your interest, the criteria are really sort of broad because we're looking for a range of states. There's no particular criteria that we're looking for when it comes to what's already in place in a state. Obviously, we really are looking for evidence that your state is committed and has the capacity to bring together all of these different stakeholders. So that really is the most important, is that you have the right people in place, and you don't have to have them in place at the time of your application. But as Luis will show you in the application, there are places where you can provide us with some evidence that you'd be able to do that pretty quickly once your state is selected. So that's really the key, is to make sure that you have a team cross-functional across all of these different agencies and departments on your team, and that you agree to fulfill the responsibilities of being an AIM state. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Luis, because if you've gotten through this and you're still here, you may be ready to apply. So Luis is going to walk us through the application.
So let's pause here just to see if there are any questions. Now that you've heard about the roles and your responsibilities, the criteria, hopefully some of you probably had a chance to review that ahead of time, but if not, now that you've heard from Cynthia, kind of the big picture of the application, we'll pause here and see if you have any questions. You could go ahead and post those in the chat while I get my screen sharing set up, and we'll be monitoring that. So don't be shy. There's no good or bad questions. The only ones are the ones you don't ask.
Yeah, and there are a lot of pieces to this. So we expect that you may have questions about, or quite frankly, if I were on the receiving end of this application and want to apply, I'd be thinking, how am I going to get all of those people together? One of the things that I didn't mention that you'll see in the materials is that we're here to provide assistance as you are identifying who are your partners internally in your state to help you build a team, a cross-functional team. So we have made connections with early childhood specialists nationally. So for example, the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center is partnering with us. So once we have states in place and there's a strong indication that there's commitment, we will reach out to partner like ECTA, and they can provide support with connecting you with the right early childhood people in your state. Same thing with workforce. So the National Disability Initiative, we're working with them. For your higher ed groups, the Association on Higher Education and Disability is partnering with us. So we are looking for that evidence that your state is motivated, that you have connections, that you're committed. Luis will show you how we've designed the survey to collect that information, but we'll be here as well as our partners to help you identify the right people to put on your team.
And there is a question coming in from John. State adoption, textbook adoption states versus non-adoption states. Is this a criteria?
Yes, we want both.
As well, I think we listed Go Open states as well. So we're looking for, quite a representation in terms of diversity. So any other questions, go ahead and feel free to share those in the chat. Either Cynthia or I will be taking a look every once in a while. So there's a few ways you can get to the application. Once you visit our website and find the page that has the information about it, this is under About AIM. And then if you go to the bottom of that menu, you'll see the page AIM State Cohort Application. So in case you, forget where we are, that's where I am navigating today. And you'll see the link, it's at the top of this page. So there's a link that says Apply Today. And then all the way at the bottom, once you've read through the information about the requirements, there's also a link towards the bottom of the page where you can access that application as well. I also want to point out that there is an at-a-glance document page. So if you want to just see sort of a more condensed view of these requirements, you can also access that. And it has a really nice timeline. I don't know if you mentioned this, Cynthia, but it is a 4-year partnership. So it gives you a nice timeline of the important dates for each year of the partnership. So for instance, we're in the first year, 2020, you'll see the application deadline there is May 1st. And then you can kind of get an idea of when things are going to happen for each year of the partnership. So from 2021, it also lists sort of when the meetings will take place. So what will happen monthly, what will happen bi-monthly, quarterly, and so on. So that's also there for you from the application page. So I'll go ahead and just, I already have it open in a separate tab just to save us a little bit of time. It is a SurveyMonkey survey. And once you get to it, there's links to the same document that we were just looking at a second ago when Cynthia was speaking. So if you forget or you want to review some of those requirements, you can go back to the website and see that and review it in more detail. And to answer a question that came up in the chat, one of the first things you're going to see on this page is there is a link to a downloadable PDF. So that's the document you can download and use with your team as you're doing your planning. And then when you feel pretty certain that you have all the information you need for the application, or you can start it at any time, but you can come here to the SurveyMonkey and then complete the application online electronically. Really important, you can actually go back and make edits. So you could start the application and then not complete it all in one sitting, and you can go back and make edits as needed. However, you need to make sure you go back to the same device and web browser. SurveyMonkey adds a cookie to your system, and I actually saw it working this morning because I had started one of the surveys, one of the applications, and then when I went back, that first page was filled out for me with my contact information. So make sure that if you go back, that you do it on the same device and web browser where you started it so that it saves you time. A lot of the information will remain filled in. And there is one required question. That is the contact information for the main contact that we can reach out to if you have any questions about the application. But other than that, there's a lot of flexibility as I go through the application. So I'll show you that in just a second where that required question is.
And Luis, just to be clear, there's no question that anybody should skip. It's
Right.
just that we don't require the questions because we know in SurveyMonkey, if you require questions, it really, it limits people's ability to go from page to page. So it's not that there are optional questions, it's just that we wanted to free up movement around the survey.
Absolutely, thanks for clarifying that. So I'm gonna select next here. And as you can see, I've already filled out some information. Don't send me mail to 555 Anywhere Street. It's not gonna get here. But the first thing is selecting your state. And actually, I noticed this morning, Cynthia, we had removed some states. So can you explain that, why we removed some states from this list?
So we've removed some states because if there were a number of states that were in the AIM Center's cohort of states from 2014 to 2019. And we have been directed by OSEP, our funder, that they would like us to invest in another set of states. So you may be a state that has worked with the AIM Center in the past. My own state of Maine was part of the AIM consortium from 2007 to 2012 or so, and that is fine if you were in a state that participated in technical assistance prior to 2014. But our AIM state cohort that received intensive technical assistance between 2014 and 2019, we've been directed by OSEP to it seems terrible to say this, but to not accept applications, to guide them not to apply because they would like to invest in other states and to spread the wealth. So those 8 states that we previously worked with, Alaska, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Maryland, Ohio, and Texas, will remain involved in the center as critical friends. We will continue to support those states as they implement the quality indicators with critical components, but OSEP has asked us to select a new set of states. So that's why those states aren't there, just in case somebody comes in and they're starting an application. We don't want to be misleading and think that we would be able to accept their application.
Right. So for instance, I'm based in Florida. So Florida does not appear on this list. You know, I could choose for demo purposes, I'll choose Georgia here, which is fairly close to me. But that's why if you see some states missing, that's why we recently worked with them as part of the last cohort, so they're not eligible. So the first question here is just information about the main contact for this application. So it's the standard information you would fill out on any of these surveys, name, agency, title, and so on. And then there are some additional fields for you to provide additional contact people. And it's always good to provide an alternate as well. So if we have additional questions for you, we can reach out to one other person. And then we just want to know how you found out about the application. This is pretty standard on most of the surveys that we do. We just want to track where people are coming from, so we know what the best methods are for reaching out to people. So that's the first page, fairly basic. And then we get into, for instance, the state level members. At each page, there is an explanation at the top. So that explains what's involved with, what's involved with a leadership team, who should be part of it, what's involved with the collaborative that's going to be created at the state level. So this provides you with that basic information at the top. So for instance, here, you'll see that the goal with the leadership team is to have a balanced representation, statewide in K12, special education, general education, ed tech programs, and then that we want you to list a minimum of 5 individuals and up to 8 state level individuals who will be part of the leadership team. So a minimum of 5, a maximum of 8, and there'll be a space for you to provide the contact information for up to 8 people here. And then for each person, you'll provide a rationale as to why they would make a good member of this leadership team. So that is the second page. You'll just go through and fill out the contact information for the leadership team. I'll go ahead and scroll down all the way to the bottom. Go to the next page. And now here, Cynthia mentioned earlier, each state is going to recruit 3 school districts. And so it provides, again, some information about who should be on the school district teams. So each of the 3 school district leaders will agree to form and sustain a cross-functional district team. And so again, here, you need to have representation from administration, from ed tech, assistive tech, special education, general education, and parent or guardian of a student with a disability. So the goal here is to be as diverse as possible, to encourage collaboration, encourage coordination so that things are not happening in isolation. But there is sort of coherent work that's happening at the state level. And as Cynthia mentioned earlier, at least one district must serve high district or high need schools. If that's not clear while you're reading here, you can go back to our website and we explain what we mean by the high need schools. So that's your rural schools, schools that serve large populations of students from low income backgrounds and so on. And then there is a question here, it's an open-ended question where you are asked to explain To what extent are you positioned to secure these 3 qualifying school districts? Because that's going to be a really important part of this process, having those districts. You don't have to identify them right now, but we do want an explanation of, where you are at in terms of being able to find those states or districts. So Cynthia, you were going to say something?
Oh, just what you clarified right there at the end.
Great. So we've looked at, the application first starts with a leadership team, then it goes to the state and district representation. Here's where we start looking at that interagency collaborative. And so this is that targeted technical assistance that's happening at the state level. And we've highlighted in bold here, but again, we want representation from early childhood programs, higher education institutions, workforce development, and parent centers. So it's sort of providing that coordination across the lifespan to make sure that as kids move from each of these different, areas of their life, phases of their life, that there is some coordination when it comes to the provision of AIM. So we're being a lot more intentional with this AIM Center in terms of addressing the lifespan. Similar to the previous screen, you're not expected to identify the members at this time, but definitely want to make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to go about finding them. And as Cynthia mentioned, we will help with that sort of process because we have experts not only at CAST that have background in each of these stakeholder areas, but we also are working with a number of partners nationally that can help us locating people in your state that would serve these roles. All right, so then we sort of go through each of the stakeholder groups that would be in that interagency collaborative and ask you a few questions related to that specific stakeholder group. So for instance, this is the early childhood one. We would ask you about IDEA Part C services, Head Start services. So different service areas or programs that are related to early childhood in your program. And the pattern will repeat itself for each of the other stakeholder groups. So for higher education, workforce should come next, logically. And then parental engagement, which is such an important component. They're great partners of us in doing the AIM work. And there is a question from Kathy, so let me pause here.
Yeah, so Kathy's asking if, so no post-secondary representative at this time. So that's correct, Kathy, that for any of these stakeholder groups, you do not have to, at the time of your application, list any specific individuals. You'll see that where Luis was pointing out that we have questions about, do you already have, sort of on your state level team, are there people who have connections with early childhood? Are there people who have connections with workforce, with higher ed, with parents? And that just gives us an idea of what are the connections that already exist within your state. So if you, I think the more clear and specific you are with where your state currently is with making these connections and being able to onboard these representatives from these various stakeholder groups in a timely manner, the easier it is for us to have an understanding of how ready a state would be to begin this fall. But not having those connections on your state leadership team by no means rules you out as a state. It just gives us a sense of where your need might be as well with identifying the right people to join your leadership team.
Absolutely. Kathy, let us know. It looks like that answered your question, but if you do have a follow-up, please share it in the chat and we'll be happy to clarify. So the next set of questions on the application basically are pretty nicely mapped out to the responsibilities and criteria. And it's almost like when you read the syllabus in a college course. This is to make sure that you've gone back and reviewed those parts of the website, you're clear on what the expectations are, and then you would come here and sort of agree that you're committing to these responsibilities as part of the application. And there is an area here where you can also add some comments for clarification. And then, and again, I want to emphasize here, the purpose of this next page where we ask you about your existing system. This is not to evaluate or place judgment on you. This is, as Cynthia just said a second ago, is for us to see where you are in terms of your readiness when it comes to the provision of AIM within your state, and where we could be of the most help to you. So it asks questions about, for instance, in terms of purchasing and procurement policies. What do you have in place already? What standards are you, following, and so on? So there's a few questions like that.
And Luis, to be clear here is that these questions are for your state education agency overseeing K12. So to try to keep this streamlined, we're not asking you to look for, your whatever Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act requirements you have in your state, or early childhood and accessibility in your state, because through the AIM Center, our charge for intensive technical assistance is at the K12 level. These questions are at your state education agency and school districts. Where are for example, where are the requirements? Are there requirements in place around accessibility in procurement policies, as well as in selection of materials and technologies for that particular question, and the others, because this is what questions 41 through 45 or 46. Yep. All of those relate specifically to your K12 system.
And the other thing I noticed is a lot of these questions relate to our critical components, or quality indicators, I should say. So for instance, timely manner, data collection, are you aware of the data collection systems and in your state? So these track pretty well to the quality indicators for the provision of AIM. So if you want to learn more about like the background behind any of these questions, you can check those out on our website. Then there are a few questions just to get your perspective and motivation. So why do you want to join the AIM Center state cohort? How would this align to your state's vision and goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion? So it takes this and puts it in an even larger context of inclusion and equity. And then if you are selected, how would the AIM Center support your success? So we want to make sure that this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Obviously, it strengthens our technical assistance efforts, but we also want to make sure that it's, providing you with the tools that you need to create robust systems at the state level. So the way that I think about it is that it's sort of vertical, and that it's, intensive technical. And then we also provide universal technical assistance at the AIM Center, which is available to everyone. And then at the state level, it kind of pans out in a horizontal way so that we have different stakeholder groups, such as early childhood, workforce, higher education, that kind of pan out from that K-12 focus, so the intensive technical assistance. And then guess what? The last screen is the favorite screen of everyone who's completed a survey. It's when you get to say submit. So again, you don't have to do this all in one sitting. If you're working within the same browser, the same computer, you can actually fill out, for instance, all of the contact information once you have that. And then it may be that you need to go back and reflect a little bit more on some of the other questions and then come back and fill it out. And again, we encourage you to download the PDF, which is at the beginning of the application form, and use that as a planning tool so that you prepare before you submit the information in the online tool. So let me stop sharing there, and then I'll just come back and see if we can answer. We have about 15 minutes, so it's plenty of time to answer any of the questions that you have. And then the other thing I would add is these questions may benefit people that are not here. So, any question you provide, I'm sure it will be helpful to someone who may be watching the recording or can't make one of these information sessions. And thank you, Cynthia, for sharing the quality indicators as well. So that's good background to have as you prepare to fill out the application as well. So we're happy to entertain any questions at this time, any comments. There are great. So there's some questions coming in. I'll read this out loud for everyone's benefit. So Deborah says, I think we're good to go for now. I feel we have the pieces in place in Oregon and we'll begin completing the application right away. Thanks for the opportunity. So great to hear that, Deborah. And then the rest are just thank you. And Kathy says, thanks. So helpful.
Great. And if you, before you go, let's drop the, I'm going to go one more slide here to a reminder. Luis and I are going to hang out. So if there's some of you who are still processing all of this information, we will remain on the line here. But just as a reminder, if you're heading out, remember that there's the March 9th webinar. If you want to come back, if you want to share that information with other people who you think you'd partner with on the application, and you say you should also sit in on this, they can watch the recording, but sometimes it's helpful to sit in live on sessions like this. And then the deadline for your application is Friday, May 1st. The survey for today is here with all the hearts. Luis, those hearts are just spread everywhere. I just love it. Never know where hearts from Luis are going to pop up. But please take a moment to complete. It's a brief survey. It's more informational about did you get the information that you want. Of course, we're doing this webinar again, so your feedback will be really helpful. I think thank you, Mia, for dropping the link in the chat as well. So just wanted to get that out there for those of you who are ready to get your weekend started, your long weekend. We know it's Friday afternoon, but Luis and I will hang out for those of you who have questions coming in. So thank you if you're heading out. We appreciate your being here and getting more information about this opportunity.
And John, you were asking, can you put that link in the chat? Is that the survey link you're referring to? It's right above in the chat. It's the bit.ly one, AIM info session 1. So that will take you right to our survey. And you can also scan the QR code. We have a QR code on the screen as well.
Oh, I think you're right. Oh, yeah, you are correct, John. John, you are a Zoom a Zoom expert. So Mia, the link went to the panelists. The feedback survey went to the panelists rather than to everyone. So that's Mia's gonna come right back with that. Sarah Lowe is saying that she's going to reach out to the New Hampshire AT Leaders Group. That's great. Sarah, you should also know that Mary Lane at your Department of Ed is also coordinating an application. So please reach out to Mary Lane and hop on to that effort.
Great. So everybody should be seeing the link to the survey now. We have it as all panelists and attendees. Sorry, I didn't see that it said all panelists there.
Yeah, you know, yeah. Here's the link. Yeah, so that is it was by default, even though we are the ones who tell everybody to make sure you're going to all attendees sometimes. So the quality indicators, I just dropped that link. And I think the others
were okay, I think.
Yeah, I think it was the link to the survey and the quality indicators were probably the two that. And I'll also drop the link to where the recording will be. And Leslie O'Callahan, who many of you know from the AEM Center webinars, she's not working on, she doesn't work on Fridays, so that's why we have Mia. Thank you, Mia. But Leslie will be sending out the recording as well as the other materials for this webinar within the week. But that's where the bit.ly that I just dropped in the chat, that's where you'll find the recording once it's available. So John says, it's good to know if you have heard from others in our state, let us know. Perhaps there are some hidden friends in our state. So I will say, John, that I do believe that, and I think we may have talked about this, Aaron Frazier, I believe, has been notified about the opportunity. Bill Wilmot at CAST has worked with Aaron in a previous capacity at a school district. I believe he informed her of the opportunity. Of course, you and Kathy, and I believe that's all that I know. Oh, and of course, Hillary in Kennebunk.
Yep. All right, so I think what we'll do is we'll stop the recording here. So Mia, if you can go ahead and stop the recording, but Cynthia and I will hang out for just